You're listening to The Social Workers on WCDB Albany.
On WCDB FM Albany 90.9. I'm Catherine Zox, your social worker with a microphone, with Alyssa Lotmore and Ethan Ullman. How are you this morning, guys?
Good. It's good to be back this month.
It is. A month is too long for me anyway. We need our weekly shows, but we have a lot packed into the show today. And of course, our first guest is the Dean of the School of Social Wealth at FAIR, Catherine Breyer-Lawson. Hi, Dean. How are you this morning?
I'm fine. How are you?
We're good. So We're ready to hear what is happening in the School of Social Welfare, what's going on. We're almost to the end of the semester, but still I know there is a lot going on. So tell us what is happening.
Well, I'll tell you about a very special event that occurred yesterday, because I think it's a harbinger of more to come. With the Albany Law School, our school co-hosted a forum on lawyers and social workers and their collaboration to stop elder abuse. This was done with the co-sponsorship of the State Office for Aging, as well as the Empire Justice, a team of attorneys, and a downstate Jewish association serving the elderly agency, and some of the abuse and fraud, particularly around financial abuse and manipulation, very delicate work involving family dynamics, perhaps an elder who doesn't even know they're being victimized or exploited. And so the group yesterday unpacked a lot of the issues. They're looking now for ways to go deeper and build longer-term collaboration. Just a very important agenda for us for this decade, if not century.
So you're saying that's a harbinger of what's to come. I mean, more meetings or more conferences like this with social workers and attorneys. That's a good combination.
Yes, and also looking at what are the teams that can best intervene in some of these very delicate, very challenging family situations. So it's not an exploiter who's necessarily a scam artist externally. Sometimes some of the dynamics are internal to families. So it takes teams, and looking at ways now to build this out, not just in terms of practice, but the knowledge as well as the handling and the referrals, will all be part of continuing collaboration. We have a joint degree with the law school in Albany, and so this is part of that ongoing collaboration.
What would you say was like one maybe of outstanding issue? Maybe you said, they are unique issues and delicate issues when it comes to this topic. Is there one that stood out?
Well, from what I can tell, the internal family dynamics are often more complicated because an elder may not feel like a victim, so they're not going to press charges. And yet we certainly want to be able to be both protective as well as honoring and respectful of all parties' involvement, and at the same time ensure that justice is done. So unlike an external scam artist who knows that preying on the elderly may be a way to get resources, this internal family dynamic may be a little more nuanced and requiring teams that are highly skilled and knowledgeable. So that's what we're working toward.
Now, tell us, what can we look forward to in the next, say, 6 weeks in the School of Social Welfare in terms of events?
We have a number of our faculty, including our research faculty, getting awards from our president for their engagement in the community and their scholarly engagement work, really historic markers. So Rose Green and a team from the Center for Human Services Research for their powerful work in our Albany City Schools. Heather Larkin with her wonderful work with a group of agencies addressing adverse childhood experiences and trauma. Arlene Lev with her work on sexual orientation and gender identity. And Hal Lawson with his work on schools, on parent empowerment, on health-related interventions, and interprofessional collaboration. So I believe 11 awards are being given, and I think we are getting 4.
And Dean, tell us about, because I think we should be talking about this as well, just a short clip, but I know on the website, the School of Social Welfare at U Albany, you have an e-newsletter, don't you? Is that weekly or monthly, something that we can obviously go online and look at?
It's quarterly, and so we would encourage everybody to both follow us. We're also on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. Follow us. And we will be posting not only these regular e-news updates, our research guides up for everybody to review, as well as all the other events in the school. So hopefully people will log on and see us on Facebook, see us on our website, and even on Twitter.
Great. Thanks so much for being on the show, and we'll talk to you next month.
Catherine.
Dean
Okay,
Catherine.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Everybody. Bye-bye.
That was Dean Catherine Breyer Lawson, Dean of the School of Social Welfare here at U Albany. So there is a lot going on, right?
Yes, and I also have another event that's upcoming event on Wednesday, May 7th from 1 to 4:30 p.m. The Internships and Aging Scholarship Committee is hosting their first annual Compete and Seek scavenger hunt. So it will be teams of 4 or fewer. They'll come together with the chance to win cash prizes. The grand prize is $100 plus 25% of the registration money raised. So if anyone is interested, they can email SUNY Albany IAP, so SUNYALBANYIAP @gmail.com, and with Compete and Seek in the subject line. So it should be a really exciting event.
Sounds good. Compete and seek. No, compete and seek.
Yes.
Well, I like to compete, and I like to seek, and I like to win. And I know you do, too, as a star athlete. And I think our guest is on the line, our first guest. Am I right, Ethan? We've got our first guest on the line. I guess we don't even have to go to break, do we? We'll just keep on going. All right, our next guest is the author of Beyond Addiction, Hope for Families Dealing with Addiction. Carrie Wilkens it's Dr. Carrie Wilkens, PhD. She's co-founder and clinical director of CMC and a dedicated practitioner and researcher of the most effective treatments for substance use problems and compulsive behaviors. You may have heard her on the CBS Early Show, Fox News, Newsweek, and seen her in Oprah Magazine. So the title of her book, again, is Beyond Addiction, Hope for Families Dealing with Addiction. Welcome to the show. Nice to have you on this morning, Carrie.
Thank you. Good morning.
Great. Are you talking as loud? Can we get it up louder?
I was going to say, can you hear me on this headset?
I can hear you, but I could a little bit louder would be better, but let's just go with this. Yeah.
Hang on one second.
Okay.
Is this better?
Is that speakerphone?
Yeah, is that any better?
No, speakerphone echoes. Go back to the other way. Everybody puts themselves on speakerphone. Not everybody, but that's always an issue. It doesn't sound good over the radio. But anyway, okay, we're fine.
Okay.
All right. Yeah.
Talk louder.
All right. Talk as loud as you can talk. Beyond Addiction. I'm just going to say one thing. One of the, and this is, I think, part of what is in your book, Beyond Addiction is described as a new book that offers an alternative to the 12-step program. And as a social worker, and there are 2 of us here, Alyssa Lotmore is my co-host, the 12-step program is kind of been the gold standard for treating addictions, hasn't it?
I don't know that it's been the gold standard. It's absolutely been what's out there pretty much across the board. And that's why we wrote Beyond Addiction, because the reality is a lot of evidence that the 12 steps and that route works for a lot of people, and we know it. We hear those stories all the time. It's helped millions of people, and it's an unbelievably rich support network. The reality is there's a lot of other treatment options, and the 12 steps don't work for everybody. If you look at the recovery rates in this country, it's pretty abysmal, and I think that's because treatment hasn't targeted this problem in quite a sophisticated way as it could. Researchers and scientists and doctors have been doing a lot of work over the last 15 years that, we understand how change happens, we understand how the substances affect the brain, there's medications, there's different types of treatment that work for different people, cognitive behavioral strategies, dialectical behavioral strategies. These are all things that substance users can really benefit from. And they're just not quite out there in the world yet, which is unfortunate.
Beyond addiction, what makes that different, though? Your book obviously introduces a new way of dealing with addictions, with alcoholism and drug addiction. So it's described as being very different because it's based on science and methodological research. And so tell us, real specifically how it is different than some of these other modalities.
Well, it's specifically written for families because what families have been told for years and years and years, and is basically the only thing people think of, is, look, there's nothing you can do for your loved one if there's an addiction problem. You need to distance yourself. You need to really don't enable. You need to disengage. You need to use this very complicated concept called tough love. So they're given this message that really goes against every instinct. When you're a family member of someone with a substance use problem, you desperately want to help. And the studies have shown that they can help. And the book is about a set of strategies called CRAFT, which is Community Reinforcement and Family Training, which really teaches the family member, so the wife or the mother, the husband, the child of an adult, of an adult who's got a substance use problem, really how to become a motivational force in their loved one's life. And it teaches them skills to take care of themselves, teaches them communication strategies so that they can talk about the problem without, kind of provoking defensiveness. It educates them about, okay, so your loved one has a substance use problem. Let's think creatively about what they need, because not everybody can go to rehab. Not everybody goes to treatment, and they can still change. So it's a book actually for family members to really help them understand all of their options.
That is something really interesting, because so many times when we think about how to intervene, families say they want to come together and have some sort of intervention where it's confrontational. And I like how your book sort of takes a step back and has that motivational piece. Does it offer that, in the subject, it talks about how kindness and it can really help. Does it help to have the family members know that there is this alternative, to help that there is a way that they can help? Was it written to sort of have that motivational piece for families who may be losing that hope that they can make that difference?
Oh, for sure. And I don't know how much you guys deal with addiction, but it's been striking to me for years that substance use problems are the only mental and physical health problem that everybody thinks confrontation, right? You got to be hard on these people. You got to challenge them, and you got to break down their denial. That's been the message. It's a mental and physical health problem, and it needs to be treated exactly like we treat all other mental health and physical health problems, which is you try to figure out, okay, what is it that's driving this, and how can we help you with medication? How can we help you with different kinds of treatment? What does your family need? What needs to change in your environment? And, this whole confrontational model, nobody likes to be confronted, not just substance users, right? If I tell you you're crazy for feeling the way that you feel, you're going to defend yourself. You're going to defend your feelings. So to take a motivational stance and train the family to take a motivational stance of, hey, I'm worried about you. Can we talk about this? And I've been exploring options. And the positive communication strategies are a very specific set of strategies. And it's not just about being kind of nicey-nice and, not, avoiding conflict and not addressing the problem. It's very direct, but everything is framed in a positive, constructive, hopeful way versus the negative way, because that's the other thing you see with families. They'll get kind of locked in this pattern where they'll say, I don't want you to drink anymore, right? So they're framing everything as a negative versus saying, I want you to come home sober because I want to have dinner with you. I miss you. So there's two very different ways to say what you want, and one will get you defensiveness, and one might actually get you what you're looking for, which is time with your loved one.
Yes, and it's also, you offer, in your book, do you offer more guidance to families to help them sort of cope with this? And it's hard for families to go through an addiction as well, and that hope can get a little shaky, that that things will get better. Do you offer, I know you said you offer some strategies for family members. Can you tell a little bit more about those, and that self-help for the family members going through this as well?
No, it's actually, I think, the most important part of the book. I literally think a third of the book is how to take care of yourself, because what I say to family members all the time is, like, if you're shaky, if you're kind of on the ceiling with fear, or you're just flying into rage every second, these are understandable feelings. They are facing something that is horrific to watch. Oftentimes, it's maddening. So their feelings are appropriate; they're not the problem, but how they express them, how they deal with them, those can be problematic. And when they're not taking care of themselves, they just can't be effective helpers. So there's a lot of self-care strategies. There's a lot of ways that we help them manage their expectations and really focus on keeping their life intact, making sure they're staying in contact with their support system, their friends, they're exercising, they're managing their sleep, because if they're just up all night worrying, they're not going to be able to deal with the next day very well. So that's actually that's where we start with all of our family members. And it's hard. It's often the hardest thing. They just want to jump right into doing something, right? And we spend a lot of time saying, no, actually, we got to get you recalibrated a little bit. You need to take care of yourself before you're going to be able to do this differently.
And I think also sometimes they start off wanting to do something. I had actually worked in a clinic for 10 years, many years ago, that dealt with addiction problems. And, a lot of what was said to family members, if you help the person who has the addiction problem, then you're an enabler. That word enabler always came up. You have to let somebody hit rock bottom. I mean, these were kind of and I think that some of that obviously still prevails today. So this is like taking a 180 from that approach.
Yeah, and I hope we can eradicate those statements, actually. I hope nobody ever says they have to hit bottom again, because it's really not true. It's really, really not true. I mean, there are some people that really take it to the last possible point before they can change. I mean, there's very complicated cases out there that reflect that, but that's not the norm. I think you can influence change, you can influence motivation long before you're ever at that stage. And I think the tragedy in this country is that families are told that message of you can't do anything, right? So they wait and they wait and they wait and they watch this train wreck happening in their house, when if they used these strategies way earlier in the process. I mean, my hope is that parents will pick up this book before their kids even start coming home with substance use problems. So the second their son comes home stoned for the first time, they actually have a set of strategies that they can be like, oh, hey, this isn't going to happen again. This isn't okay. Let's talk about it. And the other part of the book is figuring out how to set limits, right? Because it's not all just, hey, I'm going to support you until I bleed myself dry. It's, I'm going to set some limits here because it's not okay to come home intoxicated time and time again. And it's helping them learn how to let naturally occurring consequences play a bigger role, because that whole enabling thing is when family members kind of intervene and get in the way of natural consequences occurring. They end up inadvertently kind of protecting their loved one from the real life outcome of their substance use. Like, maybe you actually do have to go talk to the principal because you're late for school again. Maybe you do have to go deal with your boss. I'm not going to call in sick for you because you're laying in bed hungover. I'm not going to pick up the mess. I'm not going to pick you up out of the hallway that you passed out in. I'm going to let you stay there and let the neighbors see you, because when you wake up, you're going to feel more upset about your own substance use, if you're actually feeling some of these consequences. So it's a pretty complex set of strategies that, families can use in a very flexible way depending on what they're facing.
And I think also some of the examples you gave, does your book sort of talk about, a lot of times when family members do those things, it might be to protect themselves from, other people finding out, and sort of that own sort of protection of, I want what's in my family to be private. I don't want other people to know. And it seems like your book sort of helps family members process that you have to let other people, you have to let the person sort of take that responsibility, even if that means other people might find out, sort of taking that, going out of that comfort zone as a family member as well.
Yeah. And in the book, there's kind of a stepwise assessment of okay, what are the negative consequences? What are the naturally occurring consequences that could be left kind of to play out? But to really think through them concretely, is it actually safe? If it's a matter of picking your husband up at the train station because if you don't, he's going to drink and drive, well, that's probably a consequence you actually do have to get in the way of, right? Because you don't want your husband drinking and driving.
Yeah.
So it really helps them kind of think through, what are the things that I can leave alone and what are the things I need to keep taking care of? And again, helping them think strategically instead of emotionally, because, the emotion kind of gets in the way a lot of the time. From being able to make good decisions about this stuff. And I think the shame, that what you said, like, you get labeled an enabler, right? Which is the same as you get labeled as an addict. Nobody wants to have those labels. So the whole system closes down because people don't want to be called those things, and they don't want to be judged. So I think we have to change, again, how we're talking about the problem in this culture in general, because the shame is totally in the way of massive amounts of people getting help that they need, both families and the substance users themselves.
Carrie, what do you do in the event and I've obviously in social work practice come across this, but you get the families where you have two generations of someone's, let's say, suffering from alcohol addiction, one parent and then the child, and then you have, let's say, a spouse or a partner who's trying to handle all of this with her or his partner and the next generation.
Right. Yeah, I was thinking about being on your show. I mean, I think social workers are really on the front line of this. I mean, social workers see how this affects families in so many different ways because they're embedded in so many different systems. They're in the criminal justice system. They're in the, family support kind of networks and, domestic violence issues. They're in the medical institutions. So they're everywhere. So they're really seeing it. And they've got this great opportunity to educate families on options, that they can take advantage of, and the biggest one being you got to get support. Somebody who's dealing with multi-generational substance use problems, they 100% need support, whether it's a support group, whether it's a therapist, because they can't do it alone. They really, really can't. They'll burn out. They can't possibly have the resources to manage all of that. And you do see it in families. One of the nice things that we see in our practice is I can't tell you how many times where I've been working with a substance user, right? So they come in with their own problem for whatever reason, and I'm hearing about their spouse or I'm hearing about their child. You kind of get them back on track, and then you can start to help them help their loved one, and they're totally motivated to do it. I mean, they really want to, once they start to feel better, they're like, oh, I really want to help my son feel better too, or my mother, or whoever it is. So, I think it can trickle out into the whole family gets healthier. And the craft model, they've actually found that in the research studies, family members who participated in doing craft, the entire family system got healthier. The significant others reported less depression, less anger, improved physical health. So, this way of approaching the problem really does make the whole system healthier. It takes a while and it takes a lot of hard work, but it does work.
What about gender differences? I noticed, and there have been statistics on this, that if a spouse, a woman, her husband has an addiction problem, she tends to stick with it and stay with him. Whereas the opposite is not necessarily true. When women have an addiction problem, very often the men leave. Now, I don't know if the statistics are the same today as we speak, but can you talk about that, the gender differences in terms of who stays and who, may follow the program?
I don't know the statistics, but the lovely doctor who developed craft, Bob Myers, developed it because he grew up in a family where his father was the drinker. And, he watched his mother take care of his father, and, they fought all the time, and he is convinced that his mother died early. Because she was so stressed by dealing with the problem at hand. So that's part of why he developed this whole intervention. And I think, we know just in terms of writing this book, I think women are the ones who are buying this book because women are caretakers and they tend to be kind of managing the whole system. And so they are the ones that seek treatment first. And, in all the studies on craft, they tend to be full of women, trying to do this because they're trying to help their families. So I don't know the actual numbers, but anecdotally, what you're saying is absolutely true. Hopefully it'll change. We're hoping to make it so that men feel like, these are real strategies I can embrace. In terms of it's not just all about talking about feelings. These are real behavioral strategies that work.
Well, I think when you use the word strategy, that works well for men. You sort of, just changing the word. Strategize and strategy. I think those are good terms. What's been the response of the community? You're a psychologist, the psychologists, social workers, and as you mentioned at the beginning of the show, really the whole community that works with, the addictive community in terms of your approach, because it's new.
Well, that's unfortunately what I struggle with because it's really not new. It's been locked in research worlds and academic settings, and we're not doing anything new actually. And when we developed this program, we were really like, we just want to start using the evidence, right? We want to start using the science of what works. And there's a mountain of research, really well-conducted stuff that says these are the effective strategies. It just has not trickled into the treatment world, and it's a complete mystery to me, but I'm hoping that it is changing. I mean, it absolutely is changing. When we opened the Center for Motivation and Change 10 years ago, our kind of tagline of like using evidence-based treatment, you go to just about every substance use program website, they're all saying the same thing now. I'm a little skeptical in terms of, I think it actually takes a lot of training to do this stuff well, and that's one of the reasons why it's been kind of so slow to get into the system, is it takes a lot of resources to train people and supervise people and do a good job with this stuff. And I think it's hard for people kind of in more traditional recovery to kind of make the leap of approaching people in a more motivational way. It's just a different way of talking. So again, I'm hoping in 10 years we're having a different conversation about this and that everybody's talking this way, but, change is slow.
Well, I think what I really liked about your book was that it not only shows that there is hope, it provides some evidence to sort of back up these strategies do work, and here's what you can do. And it gives families that need it, what's the correct word for it? That need it, what did you say?
Hi, Lani. How's it going?
Are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We're fine. We got another call. We're busy here this morning in the studio. But anyway, yeah, go ahead.
No, it provides families with that guidance, those strategies that they need to be able to say, okay, I have sort of a guide, a toolkit that I can now, implement, and that can help raise that hope level, especially like we had said, when it gets shaky during those rough times. They have a toolkit that they can use, and I really like that your book sort of provides that for families and gives that hope with that science backed up to give that extra boost of like, okay, this can work. It's proven. It's worked for other people. It can work for me too.
Yeah, and I think that's the unfortunate outcome of the message families have gotten to date, which is it's depowered them, right? So when you tell a family member you can't do anything, they're paralyzed. And they are the thing in this country that I think can really have a positive influence on our addiction rates. They should be empowered, and they should be supported, and they should be educated, because I think they are, aside from social workers, they're on the front line, really like dealing with substance problems, because it's in their house. And if we arm them with the right tools, I think things can start to change for the better, which everybody wants.
Yeah, which I think you've done. We have to say goodbye. This Carrie Wilkens, this has been great. PhD, co-founder and clinical director of the Center for Motivational Change. Her new book, Beyond Addiction. Thanks so much for being here with us, and we'll have you on again too. We have to.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie. Maybe we'll just take a short break right now. You're listening to WCDB FM. University at Albany, 90.9 on your dial. I'm Catherine Zox, your social worker with a microphone. This is the Social Workers Radio Talk Show with Alyssa Lotmore. And Alyssa and I will be back with our next guest. Don't go away.
My name is Joe Thompson. I'm 29, and thanks to my college degree, I'm a systems analyst. And the college me would tell you,
I wouldn't be here without Big Brothers Big Sisters. My big brother believed in me, and to a 7-year-old,
that means a lot. My big brother's name is Phil, and Phil is the reason that this 7-year-old grows up to be a systems analyst.
Whether you donate money or time, you're helping Big Brothers Big Sisters help a child. Start something today at bigbrothersbigsisters.org. Brought to you by Big Brothers Big Sisters and the Ad Council.
Over 13 million people are affected by famine, war, and drought in the Horn of Africa. Unfortunately, just listening to this commercial won't help them. Just listening won't give them their next meal, or shelter, or hope. You can help by texting GIVE to 777-444 to donate $10, and by going to usaid.gov/FWD to forward the facts. Brought to you by the Ad Council and USAID. Text donations go directly to Consortium of Humanitarian Relief Organizations. Standard text and data rates apply.
Welcome back to the Social Workers on WCDB Albany.
Back, I'm Catherine Zox, your social worker with a microphone, and you are listening to WCDB, University at Albany. It's the Social Workers Radio Talk Show with Alyssa Lotmore and Catherine Zox. And our next guest is right here from the University at Albany School of Social Welfare. She is a professor here, Dr. Lani Jones. Dr. Lani Jones is the principal investigator on 2 research projects on health and mental health outcomes among Black women towards the development of culturally congruent services. We have to find out exactly what that means, right, Alyssa? She's a nationally recognized speaker on mental health practice interventions with traditionally underserved populations. And today, Dr. Jones is going to be talking to us about the use of Black feminism in social work practice. Welcome to the show. Well, can I call you Lani because we do know each other?
Yes, we do, of course.
Okay, good. Well, Alyssa and I were talking before the show. Dr. Jones is going to be talking about the use of Black feminism in social work practice. What is that?
Well, let me begin, I think, let me begin by saying thank you, and I'm glad to be on the show. But when we talk about Black feminism, in particular, it speaks to the importance that both the change consciousness as well as the social transformation of political and economic institutions kind of constitute the essential ingredients when we talk about psychological and social change for all women. So when I refer to Black feminism, we can talk a little bit more about what that means when we begin to translate that into social work practice specifically.
So for the average listener who might not have that social work background, what would sort of be, in lay terms, really the overall picture of what it is?
In lay terms, I would say that it's about self-empowerment, it's about preservation, and it's about inviting community into your healing process and to helping them heal as well.
Okay, so this has been your, Lani, this has been your focus you've been doing research and for a long time, right, in terms of this particular topic?
Yeah. I would say over the past 10 years, it's been my trajectory.
And how did you, and why? Why are you doing this, and what's, obviously you're passionate about it.
Well, I think that my calling into the work around Black feminism developed at a very young age, and I can say that it must have been when I was in high school and I began volunteering, primarily out of a need to begin to enhance the way in which I was preparing for college. But little did I know that what I got myself into was being a listener and transferring that later on to becoming a change agent for women. So during my college years, I invested in many programs where I worked with young women of color and decided to carry that over to my doctoral studies as well. And I would say, if I had to really pinpoint, as a master's student in social work, I was placed in a community in Boston. And I remember, so we would provide our traditional services. And one day in class, we were asked to do something different. And what I chose to do at that time was to start a group program with women in the early intervention program. So I had the ability to bring mostly single mothers together to begin conversations about self and places in which they saw they wanted to move forward, but there were obstacles. And just talking through, no solutions, but talking through how they would imagine difference in their lives.
So are we talking about a group of women of color, white women, Black women, a combination, or?
At the time, it was primarily a group of women of color, ranged from African American, Latina, and West Indian women.
I guess my question is, and I don't know, Alyssa, if you've thought about this, but what is the difference, and be real specific about it, between feminism, black feminism, white feminism? Yeah, I'll stop there. Tell us.
No problem.
Yeah.
That's a very common question. And if we look at it from a historical perspective, one of the things we do know is that when feminist therapy emerged in the 1970s, or when feminism emerged on the scene in the 60s, particularly for feminist therapy, as a response to kind of the second wave of feminism, we know that feminism's really, the focus was on the social and economic equality, right, regardless of gender. And the difference with when we say black feminist therapy, one of the arguable points was that there was no focus on women of color and any differences that they may have brought to the struggle. So these scholars and feminists argue that historically that feminist epistemologies or ideologies excluded and devalued the experience of black women. And therefore, in terms of social work, it misguided our interpretations of their realities at the conceptual, at the theoretical, at the practice level.
So give us an example of that, because, very specifically, let's say of a black woman, specifically, obviously, black feminism. What are the issues, the overriding issues that may be very different I guess in a case study, because that's very helpful.
Mm-hmm. So let me go back, and because there's often misnomers about black feminism. One, that we have to remember that black feminisms it's a value stance, it's a worldview, it's a way in which to view the world and view the person that sits in front of you. And for black feminisms, or just thinking about feminist therapy, you don't have to be a woman to receive, or you don't have to be a black woman to engage in black feminist practices. Because what black feminist practice has done was to kind of look at, the term intersectional has been fairly commonly used. I think Kimberly Crenshaw, a lawyer out of UCLA, has written extensively, and others have followed. So I think I first have to say that, but to say that in a case study, it may be that a young African-American woman comes into practice. And the difference is giving the space for that person to tell their story, which may not be any different. The difference is that the therapist may ask that person, specifically if they come to practice and they say, I'm having difficulties on my job, and I just feel that people are treating me different because I'm a person of color, or I'm not receiving an advancement in my job. That would be somewhat of a common issue, and people can actually relate to that. In the struggle, so we know there are a lot of psychological consequences that go along with that kind of the racism and the oppression that occurs in the workplace.
Are there other more subtle things that we need to be aware of? Yeah, that seems the obvious, or it should be the obvious for a professional, a social worker specifically, but subtle differences, ones that we aren't aware of.
Oh, well, there are subtle differences, and I think that I won't focus on the differences, but I think that where we focus on is that I think we have to, as practitioners, always remember the unique history and legacy that black women often bring into practice. And so not that you can solve everything, but I think the subtleness lies in when that person is telling you her story, might want to begin to ask, is this something that's intergenerational? Or these things that may have occurred, your mother, your grandmother. So it's very difficult, as I mentioned, because it can be very because it's about how you view that person's.
So we are talking about
world.
cultural differences, isn't? I mean, I hear that you have to be very clear culturally. I mean, whether it was a Hispanic woman or a Jewish woman or somebody who comes from a different country, is that kind of what we're talking about? You really have to be very aware of the culture.
I mean, it's about being aware of the culture when you're talking about conducting feminist therapy, but it's the way and the manner in which the treatment is conducted. So when you think about, in particular for Black feminist therapy, it's more about, let's see, you want to be able to think. So let me give you an example of some research or some research that I've recently engaged in. Myself and Dr. Lynn Warner here recently edited a manuscript, submitted a manuscript, and it really focused on reducing depression and stress, as well as decreasing externality in terms of locus of control, in terms of how a person might see themselves and how they believe the world views them. So what became important there is that in my intervention work, it was about engaging these women in exercises, and one exercise I used was calling Healing Truth. And this was really about exploring one's race and gender roles. So hopefully that helps to explain. So you're exploring expectations of others, as well as that expectation to be that strong Black women, and helping them to discuss ways in which these roles impact their psychological and physical function. Because this myth of the strong Black woman has always forced Black women to act in accordance as if they can overcome and do everything. Because the literature tells us, in particular, that Black women have strong coping skills. But what I've noticed in my work is that when you give these women a space to begin to let go of this mask, that once they begin to bring down their mask, their coping actually increases, because there's always this mask, a mask of dissimulation, of having just to, whatever it may, not tell the truth, withdraw because of just self-survival and preservation.
So they're trying to fit into the picture that they think you or you may have as a therapist of them as the strong Black women. That's the woman. That's the expectation. Yeah. And so you miss a lot of not just nuances, you really miss their story, because they're not going to tell you that story. And then, of course, you're not going to give them you can't help. Right. Yeah.
And it's not until we as practitioners are able to say, I'm interested in hearing your story and the way that you want to tell that story. And this is not based on what I've read in a textbook or what I've read through the media, but I want to hear your story. So it's about validating their experiences. And it's also about being able to, as social workers, acknowledging our own value system and its potential impact on the ability to really maintain an empathetic, therapeutic relationship with these women in practice.
Now, are we talking, Lani, just in theory? I mean, I know you're a researcher, but is this actually being carried out in social work practice? Well, let's say here at the School of Social Welfare at Albany, are we doing what you are proposing, or is this something that we're teaching our students that they have to be aware of, or is this just, not just, but is this research, or is this something that's really out there in practice, in social work practice?
this is something that's out there in social work and psychology in terms of practice. I think that the problem has been for many feminisms that we just have not written much about it, and we've begun to write about these things. So I do document the social workers who are doing this work. Robert Jackson, Carlton, Lani have written about this, in particular for use of the Black feminist perspective in mental health and substance abuse treatment.
I'm always interested in generational differences, and we're kind of sitting here. I think we represent all the different generations. Alyssa, do you know
Yes.
Dr. Jones?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So Alyssa's sitting here. She's the younger generation. You're sort of in the middle, and I'm a little bit older. But Alyssa, do you notice any? As we're listening to Dr. Jones talk about this, are there changes in your experience in clinical practice, or the people that you work with that are your age group, young Black women?
Well, I think definitely more awareness, and I think Dr. Jones is helping to bring more awareness. I still think there needs to be, I think more people, even in my generation, need to know that about Black feminism and really read about it and learn and really understand what it means and how it really plays a role. And I think having Dr. Jones on today is really helping, listeners of any generation to know what it is and, where resources are that they can learn more about it and see, because they know what the impact is and how it can affect counseling and any types of interventions.
Yeah, I mean, I just wondered, how this resonates with you and, say, your friends in terms of how you identify yourself, because I think the example that Dr. Jones just gave, you can take care of everything, that, you are the powerful Black woman who's going to take, let's say if you were in therapy yourself, I mean, would this be something that would resonate with you?
Definitely would. But I do think we always I liked how Dr. Jones was saying about them wearing that mask. And I think it really does, you want to present in a certain way. You want to be able to say, I'm the person who, I can handle this, no matter what else going on in your lives and the people that you're caring for, you still want to have that present strong, and that you are able and you are capable and you can handle it. So I definitely think that this type of approach would be very successful for that.
So,
and we're and just to kind of you bring up the intergenerational piece, and you, Catherine, we've had the opportunity, and you've had the opportunity to have Dr. Beverly Sheftal, Anna Julia Cooper professor at Spelman College on, and she represents a generation that firmly stood the ground of, the founding and really articulating Black feminism. While she's not a practitioner by any means, other women who came before, and I write about Toni Cade Bambara, who was a prolific writer and educator, and she wrote in one of her texts entitled "The Salt Eater." She said, "Are you ready to be sure? Are you sure, sweetheart, that you are ready to be well? Just so you're sure, sweetheart, and ready to be healed, because wholeness is no trifling matter. A lot of weight when you're well." Mm-hmm. And so this is a statement often, because it's about that dissimulation. It's about that masking, because it's really about, okay, as one of my great friends says, Vanessa Jackson says, are you really ready to do this Black girl therapy? Because it really means you have to drop everything and be ready to do some work and to begin somewhere and to begin where you're ready to begin. But it's, as Toni Cade Bambara said, it's a lot of weight when you're well. And trying to help women of color or women across the board understanding that while it's a lot of weight when you're well, because now you do have to deal with the reality that there are possibilities. So these feminisms, these Black feminisms, have given me this heavy sense of direction and responsibility, but at the same time, it obliges me both epistemologically and ontologically to move forward, to share this message. And for this reason, I still, sometimes ready for myself. Am I really ready? Not necessarily, to be well fully, but also to be, am I ready to help others to be well? Am I ready to light this beacon in the social work profession?
Well, I would say you're ready.
Well, I appreciate that.
I would say you are ready, and I think this is sort of a good way to leave the interview, because we really appreciate your being on the show today. And I think I can say for myself, you enlightened me, Alyssa. Yeah, definitely. So we have been speaking this morning to Dr. Lani Jones. She is a professor in the School of Social Welfare at the University at Albany, and we've been talking about the use of Black feminism in social work practice. Thanks so much, Lani, for being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Alyssa.
Thanks.
Okay, bye-bye.
We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back for our wrap-up.
Check out my new time machine.
Does it work?
Hit the button.
Hey, it's Napoleon.
Oui. Check out the future.
Hey, you have a nice house. Why don't I?
You didn't save any money, buddy.
If only there was a way I could go back in time and fix that.
Yeah.
Save something for the future. Put away a few bucks, feel like $1 million. For free ways to save, go to feedthepig.org. That's feedthepig.org.
This message brought to you by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to The Social Workers on WCDB Albany.
We're back. I'm Catherine Zox, your social worker with a microphone. You're listening to the Social Workers Radio Talk Show here at the University at Albany, WCDB FM 90.9. Alyssa Lotmore and Ethan Ullman on the board. Well, we had quite a show today, right? We had psychologists, social work. So, Ethan, let's ask Ethan. You're a man. Did you understand what we were talking about?
I tried to, yeah. No, I thought it was a great show, and I think for men especially, it's important to understand, female perspectives, because based on my calculations, about half the people are women in this world.
Or more.
Or more.
I think more. I think they're
50 at 1%,
something like that. Women live longer, and less women, more babies die at birth, male babies than women.
Oh, really?
Yeah, than girl babies. So I don't know, with that kind of a statistic, I guess there has to be more of us, and we don't go to war, so I could add it up. I don't know, whatever it is. Anyway.
One thing that I think out of all these, both guests today, it was that importance of self-care and really taking that time to personally sort of reflect and have coping skills and really be able to, in order to help somebody else, you have to help yourself first, and really understand that there is things that sometimes you need to ask for help for. In the first guest talking about addictions, the whole section of her book was about how do you care for yourself, because this is a stressful thing to work, to have a family member with an addiction. How do you care for yourself? How do you cope? How do you need to step out of that comfort zone and maybe even take off that mask of presenting to your friends and other people that things are okay, then when you're really, having these struggles inside, with your family. And then Dr. Jones came on and really talked about that as well, sort of breaking down and sort of exposing yourself in a way to someone else, to let them know, here's things that are going on. Here's how it's affecting me mentally. How can you help me? How can I get to this next stage? And how can I have these coping skills to get through even when I can't present as strong as I want to? How can I still be able to help those that I want to, and be there for those that I need to be there for?
And I think another piece to it, because we're talking about women, there was kind of a thread that was very similar. I mean, women, and I brought it up with Carrie Wilkens, the psychologist beyond addiction, because women tend to stay. Women tend to think that they are able to cope, to take care of their families if their child has an addiction problem, if their spouse has an addiction problem, or their partner, whereas men still tend to not be there or not take over in the way women do. And of course, that's exactly what Lani was talking about, the strong woman when it comes to whatever, even being in therapy, not even kind of still portraying that picture of I'm strong, I can handle everything. Something and as you just said, so we have to, as women, maybe really look into how do we care for ourselves? Are we caring for ourselves?
I mean, just talking to, going aside of addictions and everything, I was talking to some people I know who have children with autism, and the mothers are so involved, but it's also like that self-care piece just gets thrown out the window because they're doing so much for their children. I have one person I know who has 2 autistic children, severely autistic, and it's how do you cope? We went out and went out to get a pedicure, and it was sort of like, okay, this is, I'm away for home, right now. And she was also a caregiver to her mother. So at the same time, and it's sort of all of these things. Sometimes I think women take on this caregiving role and trying to be able to present in a strong way that you have everything under control. And at the same time, we're not doing that self-care. And we're sort of breaking down. And even the example of, you said the mother who had maybe died a little earlier, that our guest had said, because she had all of the stress of caring for someone else. How can we sort of take back that control and care for ourselves so we can be there for those other people for a longer time as they recover?
Do you think it's in the genes? Because it seems to be across the board. And women, and you mentioned the word caregiver, caretaker, we are the caregivers and the caretakers. So I think as social workers, all women, when we see a woman or we in therapy, whether it's individual therapy or we're dealing with families or whatever it is, I think that's something we have to be aware of. Whatever the issue is, as you're saying, it doesn't, whether it's addiction or whatever the issue is, that women come in with that set of expectations that they have to take care of it all. I mean, I know I'm generalizing, but there does seem to be some kind of an emotional umbrella that does cover this.
I mean, I think it's also, I can't say that men don't do it either. I know some men who do have that same types of tendencies and character traits. But at the same time, I think that so many times it's, okay, I have to put others before myself. I think this maternal instinct to sort of say, okay, my child comes first, or I'm the person who keeps the family together. I have to take on this role. And if it means doing a little extra on my part, so be it. And I think after time, those types of tendencies sort of get out of control, whereas it just might have been, a little extra time in my day is now turning into something that's a bigger chunk of your life than you originally expected. So I think that today's show really helped to bring awareness to that and sort of stress the importance of self-care.
So just in keeping with what you said, Ethan, because he's not a woman, he's a man, we're going to give him the opportunity to talk about something that he's passionate about. So
thank you. Yeah, I do a monthly show, and this month in April, it's April 25th. It's 4th Street Funnies. It's the Troy Night Out Spring Comedy Series at Cocopelli's Nightclub in Troy. And we have headliner Dan Frigolette coming up. He's the founder of the Hoboken Comedy Festival. 4th Street Funnies, hosted by myself and Jay McBride. It's on April 25th at 7:30 p.m. It's going to be a great show, 18+.
Well,
Sounds exciting.
Yeah, if you're there, it's going to be a great show. So
thank you.
Yeah, we're all going to say goodbye. You've been listening to the Social Workers Radio Talk Show. I'm your social worker with a microphone, and it's the University at Albany School of Social Welfare, WCDB FM. Have a great month,
Yes.
and we will see you in May.